ABACAB originally was a way of remembering the sequence of the song. A was the verse, B was the chorus, A was the verse, C was the bridge. So you went verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus. But we didn't do the song like that in the end. But our way of remembering it was just, it goes A, B, A, C, A, B, all right? The way we did it in the end was unpronounceable. But the name stuck.
It just sort of felt quite good. And then when we were thinking about titling the album and the song, really, particularly the album, we wanted to get across this more abstract nature of it. We felt this was the most unromantic thing we'd done, whereas Wind and Wuthering was only 3 albums before had been so romantic. This was much less romantic. A lot of the album's tracks were very stark and much more kind of, had a much more straightforward approach, I suppose. And we wanted to get that across with the cover, so we went with a totally abstract design on the cover. It's not definable. It just looks, it's just got nice sort of shapes and colours. And gave the title, which ABACAB, which means nothing at all really, as a title. So the thing was like an abstract painting, is how I saw it really, and that was the final effect. So you didn't really get any particular kind of, thing off the album at all. Before you heard it, it was kind of, you just knew that it wasn't going to be. Goblins and fairies. That's about, you knew it wasn't going to be that. So, and that's right, it wasn't.
I think with Duke and the cover, we did think that this isn't quite as ornate as some of the other, as maybe as feminine as some of the other covers, Wind and Wuthering particularly, and earlier. And then there were 3 was a photographic cover, but here was like something, this was like punk album, if you like, and this was, this is a Genesis cover, and our thinking was, well, if this is the cover, maybe the music's different.
I can't imagine us playing the same kind of stuff and music and sound that we did back in early 70s and not changing, because I think, to be honest, the journey's been interesting as a writer and as a recorder of music, and I think if you stayed in the same place, I'd have been bored stiff years ago. I think you've got to move all the time, I think. On this album we felt it really was time to cut with the past a bit and drop the traditional, there's a long song from Tony and there's a short acoustic one from me and something. It was just time to be a bit braver. And that coincided with moving into where we are now, Fisher Lane Farmer Studios. It had been a dream since we first started to actually have our own place to write and record in. Rather than go and write the songs and then start recording £1,000 a day in a studio, to actually be in that environment where you can write, and if it sounds good, you record it.
So we bought this place in Surrey. We were looking at the garage. The people were trying to show us around the house, and we were looking at the garage saying, that garage would do all right, But what about the house? Yeah, the house is all right, yeah. The garage, we could knock that down, So eventually we bought a sort of a 5 or 6 car garage with a house attached, and started to convert that into the studio. And the house, we thought, the Roadies could live in. And we actually started off writing the ABACAB album in the house because the studio wasn't ready, of course. And ABACAB, I can remember that very well, that song being written in a sort of, low Tudor beams living room. And we'd, by this point, thought it was time to change people we worked with a bit. It
was a definite, very conscious decision here to try and break with some of the Genesis traditions, really. Get rid of the reprises, the extended solos, the big choruses and tambourines and everything, just to have something, a different approach. And because Phil had this experience of working on Peter's album, particularly, but of this drum sound effect. And then we used the engineer Hugh Padgham, who'd worked on that album. And a lot of the size of the tracks are created by the drums rather than by keyboards. We'd always done it with keyboards. The big keyboard pad came in on the chorus and something was wide and everything. But the drums themselves, just by bringing up the ambient sound of the kit, just gave it such a big size. Very exciting effect, I think. I really liked it. and it meant you could write in a slightly different way and have a different approach. The drums are very, very prominent on this album, I think, and they're a very, very big feature of it.
The band kind of sounded like the sound Hugh got was the sound we made. Not taking anything away from Hugh, but it's a bit like in the past. The sound, I'd hear the band playing songs, and the sound was great. We'd go and record it. It was a bit like I struggled to get the sound back up to where it was when we first played it. You know, it was always a bit of an uphill job. But with Hugh, who recorded very much a playing scenario, the sound sounded kind of like we were, which is wonderful.
We started to scale down a little bit. Keyboard arrangements, we started to scale down. Do we really need that overdub? Do we really need the sound to be that thick, you know? I mean, everybody used to be a bit tunnel vision, you know, this is my sound, I like it, and I'm going to use it, you know? And we were now getting a bit better in the studio, a bit more used to sort of what we want it to sound like, and also trying to reinvent ourselves, because punk had left some mark, and, you know, we realized that, you know, we didn't want to be kind of, although we still were and still are, but we didn't really want to be thought of as being that, you know, stuck in that thing. And actually, when we played this ABACAB album live, I remember in Holland, in this particular place called Leiden in Holland, we were booed every time we played an ABACAB track. They booed us. They didn't like the scaled down thing at all. And because on the album there was some things like on No Reply at All. I mean, I'd been working with the Earth, Wind and Fire horns. I thought, if we're going to reinvent ourselves, why not have some horns on there? I mean, this is a song here we've written that sounds like kind of funky thing, you know, R&B thing. Why not have horns on it? Who says we can't have horns on it? It's our fucking record, you know? So we did it, and people hated it.
If I remember rightly, Phil's solo album was done before ABACAB and came out and was a huge, it was kind of strange, it was a huge hit while we were, I remember In the Air went to number 4 while we were actually writing the album here. But the album was kind of going that way anyway, you know what I mean, with that sort of sound feel. I'm sure very much brought in by Phil, who was sort of full of excitement for having come back and done his album and got a sort of slightly more different sound feel. And the horns came from very much from Phil. And here we went out to LA to do it, the Phoenix horns. And I always remember, I didn't really know the Phoenix horns, who were the guys in Earth, Wind and Fire. The band didn't really know. And I went to LA with Phil and Hugh, and I was expecting that they got the charts in. The guys came in, lovely guys came in and got the charts out. And I thought they'd go 1, 2, 3, 4 and go bada baba, beat it on right. And the first time they played it, absolute chaos, you know, all over the shop. At a time, wrong notes, you know. I thought these are the hottest guys around. But then I realised what happens is after a while, they're quite characters, quite funky guys. After a while, they lock in and they don't play the right notes. They have a sound. That's what I didn't realise. And when the sound works and they're tightened together, there's a definite sound. It's not just any 4 guys couldn't do that. Those guys did it together. So it was fun to do and different.
And there's no reply at all. There's no reply at all.
We did our own punk track as well, Who Done It, which was fantastic. I mean, it was just, Tony Banks had this keyboard, I don't know, I mean, it was like he was just fiddling around with it. He had and he was just trying to get these different sounds. And it was all in rhythm for some reason, and sort of I started playing, and that was it. It was the most horrible sound that we really liked.
For many people, it's kind of, you know, the worst track we ever did. Because I really like it, but perhaps I'm just perverse. I had this thing of abusing a Prophet 5. And I'd sit there and I thought, I'm doing this all the time. And Mike and Phil were just sort of, the only way we're going to shut him up is if we record this. So we recorded it. And Phil put on this sort of this very simple, very slappy sort of drum on it. And then he wrote a lyric for it, which was like, you know, which kind of was as irritating as the song itself.
Was it you or was it me? Or was it he or she? And then we did it live, you know, it was fantastic. People used to put goggles on with snorkels and stuff. It was a kind of surreal moment.
You know, you mention it around here sometimes, sort of, you know, some of the roadies and things, you know, not too done it. You know. But anyhow, I think that was quite good. And when we played it to the Americans, the album, because we had 2 or 3 other songs we could have put on it, and there was a possibility of not using Who Done It. And I remember Ahmet Ertegun saying, you've got to put that track on. because I think it's just because had such a character to it. Because we had a very, very nice romantic song called You Might Recall, which was recorded at this time, which, was a strong contender for the album. But in the end, we decided to go for the ugly rather than the beautiful.
Keep It Dark was a fun song because actually it was a drum loop. Phil played this. I think I'm right. Yes, it was. It was a drum loop. Phil played this sound, this pattern, straight beat, which actually there's a moment when he was playing it. The sound is so good, just right, that we actually looped it. And then I think in those days you actually got a bit of tape and hung a weight on it, and it actually looped it down, and we played to it. It had a great sort of heavy sound, and I think the song always kind of worked that way.
Keep it dark.
We wanted to try to keep that kind of the inhuman aspect of it. I think is what we liked about it. It becomes something inhuman and relentless. And when a thing repeats absolutely like that, it becomes almost subliminal. So you're paying too much attention to it. And then Mike had this. He's playing this riff, which kind of like goes very much against the rhythms. As the two things are kind of quite strangely positioned. If you hear it, sometimes you hear it and think, God, it's all out of time. And then the chorus comes in and all the chords are sort of anticipated and things, and the resultant effect is kind of strange. That it's all doing this a bit. But I think the resultant song, I think it works really well. I mean, it's just a lovely sort of, got very stark verses and very romantic choruses. And I kind of wrote a lyric that kind of did that. So the idea was that this character had to pretend that he'd been robbed by people, and that's why he disappeared for a few weeks. And in fact, what had happened, he'd been taken up in a spaceship and gone to this fantastic world where everything was wonderful and beautiful and everything. But he couldn't tell anybody that because no one would believe him. So I thought it was quite a nice idea.
The other song I remember too is Man in the Corner, which was Phil and the drum machine. And it had one of those lovely beats that he does, which until you know where one is, you haven't got a clue. The drum machine comes in, and I think, if I don't count from one and just listen to it, I haven't got a clue where one is. And then you find it and it's great. But many a night we did it on stage. Actually, Tony kind of going, where the fuck is one? If you miss that moment, then you can't get it. No, great song.
See the lonely man there on the corner. What he's waiting for, I don't know.
It is simplified, there's less kind of extraneous stuff in there, certainly. And I think, the tracks that, things like ABACAB and obviously Keep It Dark, which is one of my favourite tracks on this album, it's very simple. It's just one riff. And it was actually just a drum loop. It wasn't even drummed all the way through, just had a drum riff going all the way through it. And I just think it produced a... it has a very distinctive quality about it. I think what it did for us was it took us, having gone in a certain direction a certain way, we then went quite a long way a different direction, and then perhaps after that we kind of brought a bit of that, came back a bit, but brought a bit of that in with us from then on, and I think it was an important move, really. So this album, in fact, was the last album we credit anything to individuals, and we each put one track of our own on there, and everything else was group written, and it was very much group written. It was the way it emerged out of just jamming and improvising, and these ideas would evolve.
I really enjoyed the ABACAB thing. I think at the time we were stretching out a lot more. I mean, the end of ABACAB on the record was all improvised, and we were still writing all that stuff from sitting in a room with nothing, thin air.
The funny thing was, at the same time, Peter was changing. Actually, had changed probably before us. This change was coming. I mean, that's why often hardcore fans don't see it. But this transition from where we were when the album before Phil started singing The Lamb was the start of an end of a sort of era, and then the new phase is coming, really, I think, actually. Inevitable for us to survive, I think, actually.